What's going on, guys?
Welcome to ID Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in. I am going to request just one thing of you today, or we are, is that you share this episode or maybe a past episode or maybe a future episode with one friend or family member. We're continuing the self-titled fall/winter podcast subscription drive. It's totally free. All you have to do, I sound like a salesman. All you have to do is just tell one friend or family member about I Do Podcasts. And if it's helping you, and we hope it is, say, hey, this is really great stuff. Hopefully, that you're getting, and you can share that with your friend and family, and they're going to be able to better relate to you to them. Share it with your spouse if you haven't already, or partner, or Tinder date. Be like, hey, I really like you on this first Tinder date.
Let's listen to ID Podcast.
This marriage and relationship podcast. Okay, but we do appreciate it. We appreciate you guys listening and sharing the show. And on today's show, we have another great topic, and one we haven't talked too much about, and that is rejection with Dr. Hendrickson. And you may have heard of her podcast, The Savvy Psychologist. I know I always see it on iTunes.
Yeah.
But she is a clinical psychologist who helps millions calm their anxiety and be their authentic selves through her podcast, as I mentioned, and in the clinic at Boston University's Center for Anxiety and Related Disorders.
Yeah, it was a great episode. We not only talked about rejection while you are dating, but also rejection in the relationship and the best ways to kind of handle it, and how to talk to your partner to validate their feelings and help them not feel as rejected in the moment.
And like a lot of things we talk about on the show, they're small things, but they're so huge in improving your life and your relationship. So listen to the tips that Ellen gives us in today's show. And as always, we love you guys. We appreciate you listening, telling your friends and family, tell them to subscribe, leaving those 5-star reviews, and just being your awesome selves.
And we've kind of been on also this kick of doing episodes based on the topic suggestions you guys send us. And we created a thread on the Love Tribe community page on Facebook. And I just keep going back to those and keep pulling those topics. So I love it. So keep it up. We love putting out the information that you guys want to hear. And
join that page.
Yeah. And join the Love Tribe fam on Facebook.
Is it called Love Tribe Fam or just Love Tribe? Yeah,
Love Tribe is gone, so it's Love Tribe Fam. If you search that in Facebook, you will find us.
Awesome. Enjoy today's show.
Enjoy. Today's show is brought to you by our online course, Spark My Relationship. Create more passion, improve your communication, and build a stronger, more intimate connection with your partner in less than 90 days. We've collaborated with 15 therapists and psychologists to bring you the strategies marriage therapists teach their clients. To unlock a special offer only for I Do Podcast listeners, visit sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock. That's sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock. Hi, Dr. Hendrickson. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We've given our listeners a little overview, told them about your history in the field of relationships. So why don't we take a minute and tell us why you enjoy helping people improve their relationships?
Absolutely. Well, it's simply so gratifying. I know that sounds simple, but I guess that's exactly what it is. I'm a psychotherapist and a researcher. And with my psychotherapy hat on, it's just so gratifying to be able to, sit down for an hour with somebody and, try to, argue back to negative thoughts that they might be having, or to, teach them how to, supercharge their mindfulness, or to give them a nice little technique that they can wrap up with a bow and take home, and to have felt like, okay, that's something that I could do to help improve this person's life. I love being helpful and seeing that that people's lives really do improve because of it.
It's a beautiful thing to be able to do. And we're just happy to have guests like yourself on the show so we can share the information with our listeners and learn ourselves along the way. And today's topic is going to be one that is going to be valuable to people in all kinds of relationship statuses. And let's start with talking about if someone is in the dating field, and that is the topic of rejection. And I was just going to say, like, Sarah and I, we've been together for 10 years now. And I want to say, lucky enough not to be on the dating scene too long. And I can imagine now with, online dating, Tinder, you're meeting so many people and that you might like, and rejection has got to just be like this looming thing with all those touch points more than ever before. So let's dive in and talk about that.
Sure. Sounds good.
And is there one thing that's maybe the biggest problem area with someone that is feeling rejected, which to me is a very natural thing? If you like someone, they don't like you back. How can someone navigate that?
Sure. So I think the biggest thing with rejection is feeling like it's only about you. That rejection, especially romantic rejection, can feel so isolating. It feels like, oh, there's something wrong with me, or that they saw my true self and rejected me for it. And it feels so isolating. And that isolation can give rise to feelings of anxiety or feelings of depression, feeling helpless and hopeless, or feeling like, oh, well, what if this happens again? Or what if they're right? And so that sense of isolation, I think, is one of the hardest things to overcome. But at the same time, I think a major point that I want to drive home is that rejection happens to everyone, that this is just part of the journey. And so even though it does feel very isolating in the moment, ironically, it's actually something that connects us to pretty much every other human being, that everyone around us can relate to the feeling of being rejected, whether it's in a relationship or from a job they really wanted, or even just some kind of small everyday rejection, like, I don't know, getting some side eye for your new haircut, or for, a comment that might have gone wrong. But that some form of rejection, that feeling of being rejected is so universal, and that oddly connects us to a greater humanity.
Being able to take that perspective has got to be so valuable, because it can feel like we're all alone and vulnerable. And I'm glad you mentioned in job situations, just in life in general. And as someone who's an entrepreneur, Sarah, and myself, just with this podcast and other things, that's like the biggest fear, especially when you're starting out, is like our audience is going to reject us, or if you're working for someone, our boss is going to fire us. Like that same kind of feeling of needing that approval at the bottom level. And definitely the self-talk of everyone goes through it can be gratifying in helping to calm those fears. But what else can we do to shore up our
confidence?
Confidence. That's the word I was looking for.
Sure. So I think something that's really helpful to me, at least, I definitely have some perfectionistic tendencies myself, and so I am actively working on that. But something that was helpful to me was there's this lovely study. There's one of my favorite studies is you can tell how much of a nerd I am by having a favorite study, but it's from 1966, and it's by a psychologist named Dr. Elliot Aronson. And so in this study, he has people listen to one of four audio recordings. And so ostensibly, these recordings are of college guys trying out to be like contestants on a college quiz bowl show. So remember, this is the 60s, so there were still things like that. And so the study participants listened to one of four recordings. And in recordings 1 and 2, the first one is of this contestant who's very impressive, or is solid at least. Like he answers most of these quiz questions correctly. It becomes clear that he's a decent student. He has some extracurricular activities. So that's tape recording 1. And then tape recording 2, the guy's not very competent. He answers most of the questions wrong. He's very unimpressive in the rest of his life, and it's just generally not somebody you'd want to hang out with or have on this quiz bowl show. Okay, so that's 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4 are exactly the same as 1 and 2, except at the very end you hear the clatter of like some plates and the scrape of a chair, and you hear the guy say, "Oh no, I've spilled coffee all over my new suit." And when all the study participants are surveyed, they rate how much they like each or the person that they've listened to. And the guy who wins out, you'd think it would be the competent guy who doesn't spill coffee on himself, but in fact, it's number 3. It's the competent guy who does spill coffee on himself. And it's just interesting that our little foibles and like kind of the bad things that happen to us or the blemishes in our life actually make us more appealing and more attractive. It's the same tenet by, when Jennifer Lawrence falls on the red carpet, it's adorable. Or when Zooey Deschanel, does something ridiculous, it's endearing. And so this sense of being imperfect, of having gone through some rejections or having not had things work out perfectly or having to, be humiliated or to go through, something difficult, actually humanizes us and makes us more approachable, less superhuman seeming, and draws people to us. Again, of those participants, they liked the guy who spilled coffee on himself better than the guy who didn't. So I think that's really important to remember that even if we do kind of go through this like washing machine of life and get, kind of all bumped around, that we come out of it better for it. So that's an important mindset that I know in the moment when we're rejected, it hurts, it feels awful. But if we can take a larger perspective and say, hey, maybe this humanizes me, this makes me more approachable, I can actually turn this into a story and maybe use it to connect with somebody else. I think that's an important take home.
We love that study, and it is interesting and more important than ever to keep in mind that we are not perfect, and it almost goes without saying, but I'm going to say it because it can't be said enough, but to keep that in mind when you're on social media and online, because it looks like everyone just has the most perfect life and people aren't getting rejected. And it's just such a unrealistic view of what it means to be a human. And I think, and I'm sure you are discovering this in all areas of psychology, that it has really profound implications that we need to be aware of.
Absolutely. Well, because I think you're absolutely right that I think people are starting to be aware or generally aware that when they look at social media, they're seeing the highlight reel of everybody's life. Like nobody posts that, their cat pooped on the couch or that they found tampons on sale or that, they forgot to put the trash out for trash day. Nobody posts the mundane details of their life, the little defeats or the challenges. And so what happens is we see the curated version of everybody else's life, and the only life we have access to where we see all the bumps and foibles are our own. And so by comparison, it seems like ours is drastically, underperforming or is not going well. But it's only because we just don't see what's behind the curtain of other people's lives.
Is there any research on how viewing other people's social media pages really affects someone emotionally? Like, does it actually, I know when I see people's lives and I'm like, wow, that's so great. Like they have a great life. And then, I'll think, oh, wow, my life is not so good. Does it really affect us by seeing other people's social media and comparing it?
Yeah, there is research on it, exactly, actually. And so one of the studies I like and try to remember is there was a study of looking at Facebook And for people who just kind of looked at Facebook and like lurked, like didn't participate, like didn't comment, didn't like anything, just kind of looked at other people's photos and lives and comments, that they left Facebook feeling worse. But for those who were engaged and used Facebook as, what it's supposed to be for, to connect with people and to participate in their lives, they did not leave Facebook feeling worse. And so I think that's an important lesson, that if you're going to go on Facebook, to do it with the intent of interacting and to try to participate, not just kind of be a voyeur and to look and compare. So I think that's a good take home for Facebook behavior. Another Facebook study I've seen is just the likelihood of us going on to Facebook is completely related to how tired we are. When we're exhausted or fatigued or it's late at night, we're much more likely to go onto social media. And that is the witching hour. That is the hour where we're already feeling tired. We're already probably feeling burned out. And it's so easy to fall into that hole of comparison when you see your friend's Bahamas vacation pictures up, at 10:30 at night and you're exhausted. So I think just being aware of kind of mindlessly going onto social media is really important, because if we can stop that momentum and not just automatically do that when we're fatigued and use Facebook or other social media platforms more mindfully and more intentionally, that can go a long way also to making us feel better about what we see there.
It's so important to be aware of it, because even the fact that I've been aware of it for a while, and I'm not saying I'm perfect in any stretch, but that I'm aware that it can negatively affect me, but then it's still going on, like subconsciously. I think it's just in our DNA to, if you see someone else, we're social creatures. Like, we're making a notation, like, look how much fun they're having. You might not even explicitly, consciously think about you're comparing and it's negative, but there's some level of, we haven't interacted in this way for millions of years. And now suddenly we have this technology, and certainly there's good things, but really trying to be cognizant. I have come to the conclusion I just need to limit the time too. There's a whole addiction side of this that, like you mentioned, when you're tired because you're bored, you're just compulsively opening it up. And get an app that the latest iPhone update actually has a weekly tracker that shows how much you're on every app on your phone, and try to set a reasonable low level and stick to it.
Absolutely. And I think another good thing to do is that if there is an app that's making your life miserable, like if it's Facebook, or if you get sucked into YouTube or Instagram, or just if there's something that is not good for you, or you go into it because it gives you some pleasure, but then it crosses the line into, I am wasting my time, or what am I even doing this again for? Then just to delete the app. You can always reinstall it later, but to experiment with just getting rid of whatever app sucks you in and decreases your quality of life. Like, make an executive decision and just get rid of it and see what happens over the next few days. Again, you can always reinstall it, but it's really interesting to it forces us to look at our habits, like to see if we're automatically reaching for it, and like, oh wait, it's not there anymore. Oh, I just did that. Oh, that's interesting. Or to see how much time we get back, or how much differently we feel not having that particular app on our phone. So that's a challenge I often recommend to people as well.
So bringing this back to rejection, certainly if you're feeling rejected, it's not going to be valuable to go on to your social media and see how happy everyone is and they're not being rejected that day, and you're just going to wallow, and it's just not going to be a great thing for you. So like you said, delete the app, or really try to be aware of it, try to avoid it. And I want to go to this avatar we have of someone that's been rejected, and you have, it can be the lowest of the lows. You feel lonely, and it's like easier said than done to just make yourself feel happy or not rejected again. What are some steps that person can do besides, recognizing that it happens to everyone? It's not all about, you, what are some other steps they can take to kind of get out of the dumps?
Sure. So I think a lot of us, especially with a romantic rejection, tend to unconsciously try to stay connected and draw out the connection by using social media. This is a nice way to connect what we were just talking about and rejection, that oftentimes we will see what our ex is doing on Facebook. Or even I had a client who would check her ex's Venmo payments just to see, is he buying drinks for somebody? Where is he? What's going on? And it kept her, even though she knew the relationship was over, it was a way to stay connected with him. And it felt awful. She just went on all sorts of imaginary, looking at his social media, took herself to all sorts of imaginary terrible places. But it retained the sense of connection. And that felt better than letting him go completely and giving up the hope that maybe someday they would get back together, or maybe he would change his mind, maybe he would come back. And so we torture ourselves when we're rejected often by drawing out this connection and trying to stay part of their lives, even just from the periphery. So I think one thing we can do if we find ourselves in that situation is to really go no contact. And that feels terrible in the moment, to delete, to unfollow, or to unfriend, or to mute. But it can make a real difference. It's the anticipation of doing that, the anticipatory anxiety of going no contact is always worse than actually doing it. And so I think that also is helpful to know that going into it feels bad, but once you've done it, it's kind of like ripping off a Band-Aid. You feel much better. So that's one thing we can do to try to make ourselves feel better. Another is simply to take care of ourselves. When I know this sounds cliche, but I'll talk about the rationale behind it. So if we let ourselves go and binge on ice cream and stop going to the gym and kind of let ourselves go to seed, that creates a feedback loop, and we see that that's how we're treating ourselves, and we start to believe that it's how we deserve to be treated. So if then, on the other hand, we do take care of ourselves and we do keep up our healthy habits and soothe ourselves well and stay connected with friends and try not to isolate, we see that and we see ourselves as someone who should be, taking care of themselves, deserves to be taken care of, deserves to be soothed, is worthy of being soothed and taken care of. And so that feedback loop gets created. So there, it's important to put behavior before mood. So for instance, we often feel like we have to feel like doing something before we do it. We have to feel like going to the gym before we lace up our shoes. We have to feel inspired before we sit down to write or to work on whatever project we're working on. And that's not true. We can put the behavior first, and then our mood will catch up. And therefore, it's important to take care of ourselves and go through the motions, even if our heart's not in it, and our heart will catch up.
I love that tip, not just for dealing with rejection, but I think that's how a great way to approach a lot of things in life, because how often do we just feel like we want to go to the gym, But when you go to the gym,
almost never if you're me, right?
you're going to get into that mood, and it's a much better attitude to have. But not only that, it's like an easier way to go through life, because you're not constantly fighting yourself, and all kinds of self-talk, and it's just kind of just do it, and you could say that about being kind to your partner, and it might not come naturally, but it's like the saying, fake it till you make it, almost along the same lines. Just
absolutely
be the change, and then you're going to create a positive feedback loop. And now all of a sudden you're not even thinking about it, and you're like, why do I love going to the gym so much? I used to hate it. And you're just there.
It's so true. So one thing I found in working with people who have been broken up with or otherwise been rejected is that they're often angry. Is that they're often really pissed at their partner or whoever has done the rejecting, the rejector, And so something that we do is we try to dig for the softer emotion that's underneath that anger, because anger is a secondary emotion. It's an emotion that gets kind of manufactured to put on top of something that's always a little softer. Like it's usually something like hurt or sadness or guilt or shame. And what happens is that it's uncomfortable to feel that softer emotion. No one likes to feel ashamed. No one likes to feel hurt. And so we get mad because that feels better. Like it's not comfortable to be angry, but there's this kind of like, not sexual arousal, but like there's this arousing energy behind it. Like you feel some adrenaline or you feel some energy behind it. And that is preferable to feeling the hurt of rejection. But if we distract ourselves by feeling angry, we never really get to the actual emotion, which is the hurt. And so I would say to dig for that softer emotion and to try to listen to it. And so it's really that's an uncomfortable place to be. But I think to allow ourselves to touch that pain and to be mindful of it, to kind of be aware that this is what we're feeling, makes it, ironically, go by a lot faster. That if we can be in touch with it, it will kind of burn itself out. Whereas if we push it away or bury it under anger, it's going to smolder under there for a lot longer.
That is such a valuable insight to take through life again, because I'm just thinking of times that I've felt rejected. And now I'm talking just within a relationship, because we can feel rejected, and the initial outward feeling and maybe response is that of anger or frustration, but it's actually, that's the what's be external. But if I try to dig down deep into that, there's a softer emotion. And I see how just doing that exercise and maybe taking that pause, or maybe you feel the anger coming on, and rather than letting yourself go down that path, you step back and go, what is making me feel this externally? Is there more in this process that we can do, like this self-talk, to try to be introspective and realize what it is that is really deep down hurting us?
Before we continue on, we're going to take a short break to tell you about our sponsors. Today's episode is sponsored by Babbel.
Babbel is the #1 selling language learning app in the world. Not only can you learn Spanish, which has been super helpful for Sarah and I as we live in Costa Rica. I helped habla español and got the guy to fix a sink today, so that was nice. But you can also learn French, Italian, German, Russian, Swedish, and more.
Babbel's short 10 to 15 minute lessons are available on the app or online and are designed to get you speaking confidently in your new language within weeks. And one thing I love about Babbel is that it's really helped me learn all kinds of practical situations, like Chase mentioned today, fixing a sink, but also like ordering food, asking for directions, or talking to Stella's babysitter, who only speaks Spanish, by the way.
So go to Babbel.com and use offer code IDO to get 50% off your first 3 months. That's Babbel, BABBEL.com, offer code IDO for 50% off your first 3 months.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Green Chef. Green Chef is a USDA certified organic company that includes everything you need to easily cook delicious meals that you can feel good about. We received our box when we were back in Florida visiting my parents, and it has everyone in the family hooked. If you're like Chase and I, after a long day of working, the last thing that I want to think about is what I'm going to cook for dinner. And Green Chef makes it easy by delivering a wide variety of organic ingredients and new recipes to your door each week. Green Chef has meal plans that include paleo, vegan, vegetarian, keto, gluten-free, omnivore, and carnivore. So there is a ton of variety for everyone's palate. The ingredients come pre-measured, perfectly portioned, and mostly prepped, so all you got to do is cook it. And to me, that is a busy mama's dream. In our box, they sent us 3 meals, and they were all delicious, but my favorite was the crispy lemon chicken. The crispy chicken breasts were coated with lemon zest, mustard, and gluten-free breadcrumbs, and served with fingerling potatoes, green peas, and roasted red peppers. It was delicious. So to make your evenings a whole lot easier, check out Green Chef today. For $50 off your first box of Green Chef, go to greenchef.us/ido. For $50 off your first box of Green Chef, go to greenchef.us/ido.
Right. So, like, because anger makes it about the other person, like, how dare he, or, well, who does she think she is? Whereas if we sit with those softer emotions, it becomes about us, which feels worse. But then if we can kind of get to what those thoughts are, like, I'm going to be alone forever, or this means that no one will ever love me. I often ask people to journal, to get their thoughts out of their heads and onto paper, because just processing it enough to put it into language can be helpful. But then once it's on paper, we can challenge those thoughts. So, like, for instance, like, oh, because your Tinder date rejected you, does this really mean you're going to be alone forever? Let's unpack that. Is that true? Let's shed a bright light on this and see if that is accurate. We're not just trying to slap a happy label. We're not just trying to think positive thoughts about it. We're trying to look at it accurately and say, is what our anxious or hurt or rejected brain is telling us accurate? And oftentimes it's not. It's oftentimes much more dramatic than it needs to be. And so we can kind of talk down these thoughts from, I'm going to be alone forever, to, oh, well, that sucked, but I can pick myself up and try again. And I think that actually segues into a point of it can be, no one who's been rejected wants to hear this, but it can be helpful to go through some of these painful experiences, because then when you find the right experience, when you find the right person, or you have a good relationship, there's that contrast as evidence, like, oh, this is different, this is better. And I think without the rejection or the lousy relationships as contrast, we don't even know what we have. So I think it can be helpful to have a bit of a background of, rejection or bad experiences to offset and to highlight when we really do find a good connection and or a good relationship.
And also, too, I'm sure people who journal their experience, if they have another experience similar to that, like another rejection, they can go back and reference and say, hey, I got through this and this is how I did it. And these were the feelings at the time. And I came out the other side. And so I know I can do it again. Absolutely. I'm really glad you made that point, because it looking back is, hindsight is 20/20. And so we can look back and say exactly that. Like, look, I got through this. I'm strong. I'm tough. I can handle hard things. Because when we're looking at it from before we've gone through it, when we're looking at it from that side, it's so much scarier. And like I said before, that anticipation is always worse than actually having done it. So yes, we can remind ourselves that we can do hard things. We can get through stuff and we can cope.
So the feeling of rejection is probably going to be more prominent in someone that is dating and meeting new people. And I imagine that can be strong and evident in a lot of people that are not finding their long-term partner right away. But then once we're in a long-term relationship, feelings of rejection can still come up. And I know Sarah and I have dealt with this, where if I want to have sex and she turns me down because any number of good reasons, then I just would have this response of being rejected. And then I've dug into my childhood, but there's a lot of layers. But maybe you could talk about, we could break down an instance like that and other ones that might happen in more committed relationships.
Sure. So no, I'm actually really glad you brought up the the example of wanting to have sex. And so I'm going to give a shout out to my to a book called Love Worth Making. This is by Dr. Stephen Snyder, and he talks about this exact issue. And so I think it's important to note that the feeling rejected can affect both of you. That then, you feel rejected, but also I wonder if Sarah might then feel a sense of obligation, like, oh, I've got to make up for this later. And that creates pressure and it creates expectation. And so that kind of stress is very difficult it's hard to feel sexy. It's hard to feel like you want to connect in that kind of an environment. And so Dr. Snyder talks about trying to increase just being mindful, and when there is pressure to have sex, to try to diffuse that by simply lying together without expectation and being mindful of the moment, being mindful of breathing, being mindful of your partner's body, being mindful of your reactions within your own body, and then just letting what happens happen. And sometimes that will lead to sex, and sometimes it won't. And he talks about this much more eloquently than I am right now. But it's a nice way of kind of getting around this cycle that we get ourselves into of rejection and expectation, building pressure. And I think that trying to, rather than increasing the pressure to try to make things happen, letting go completely actually is more effective and gets us to where we want to be in the end.
I think not eliminating, but working on the expectation was it was important and valuable for me, and can be an important way to deal with a circumstance like this or any number of them, is that if you go in with the expectation that it's going to happen, and in your mind you're forming, we have this way of just trying to materialize things in our mind, and that's the way it's going to be. And then when it doesn't happen, it's that feeling of rejection, because it's like, wait, this was supposed to happen. This is what I want to have. So keeping the expectations in check, I have found very valuable. Are there ways that people can practice realistic expectations, and this is also an issue is I say lowering the expectations, but then where do we draw the line? There's a lot there. Sorry.
Sure. That's a great question. So yeah, because I think to reflect this. So what you're asking is like, how can we temper our expectations? Because oftentimes we go in with like kind of a movie in our mind of how we expect things to go, and then when the actual action diverges from the script we have in our head, we feel disappointed or rejected. So how can we let go of that without having no expectations or like being a doormat? So I think we can go in rather than trying to have expectations and saying like, this is how it should go, or this is how I want it to go in with an air of curiosity. Like, I wonder how this is going to go. I wonder what's going to happen. And just following that natural curiosity and responding to our partner in the moment, this forces us to really look and listen to get our information rather than looking inward at our own head at what that script is. So when we're forced to turn our attention inside out, away from the script in our head and outward to our living, breathing partner in front of us, and to listen to them and, look and see what's happening, it makes us much more agile and makes us able to respond in the moment and create a more authentic experience. And so I think when we're going in with expectations, a nice thing to do is to try to consciously, again, turn that attention inside out and to root ourselves in the moment where we are, and to just see what occurs. We're still engaged. We're not just, laying back and being passive and saying, oh, whatever happens in this interaction. We are still active, but we're not trying to steer that ship with white knuckles.
So what would be the best way for me to I guess I don't want to say reject Chase, but communicate my feelings without him, like me actually rejecting and then him feeling rejected?
I think that's a great question. And I'm sure, millions of people are in your shoes and I think, and while I don't have a magical answer, I think that it's important to balance, being honest and communicating what you want and don't want at that moment, but also to retain that connection. And I think that maintaining the connection is something that both of you can do. So you can talk honestly about what would work in the moment. Like, is it enough to cuddle? Is it that you have something on your mind and you'd like to chat about it, and that maybe feeling more connected to him would later lead to something, whether that's that night or later in the future? I think there's a lot of ways to go about it, but trying to balance your what you need and want, but maintaining that connection with him is all part and parcel. And so it allows for some fluctuation and allows for the waves to go up and down. And maybe later, that you'll feel like initiating, or maybe you'll feel like neutrally receptive and something will happen. But in a nutshell, it's that balance of trying to maintain connection, maintain the sense that you love him, you want to be physically connected with him, and that there are many other opportunities for that, not just that moment. So I think if he won't feel as rejected because he knows that it comes from a place where this is an ongoing relationship, and there are many, many chances, not just this one. So it's not, all the eggs are not in one basket.
100%. And I think that would make me feel a lot better, and not that Sarah needs to do anything, like you said, like it's her right to not want to, but that's why relationships are hard, because we have to navigate each other's histories and personalities. And I just feel the connection and the empathetic response is such a valuable thing, whether it's to avoid the feeling of rejection or to avoid the feeling that my partner is not on the same team just because they disagree with how we handle the finances. So to me, it's along those same lines of, rather than just saying, no, I don't want sex, or no, we're not going to spend money this way. It's like acknowledging the partner's feelings. I understand that you want to have sex now and I love you so much, or I understand that you're concerned about the finances in this sector, and let's try to handle it this way. That, for me, and I think in a lot of relationship dynamics, it can be all that it takes. And I'm not saying that's an easy thing to do, but that it's so valuable in navigating rejection on both sides.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between nope and a sense of empathy, and like how would we like to be rejected? I think each of us would like to be rejected in a sense of, I love you so much, not right now, I'm not feeling it tonight, but let's cuddle. I think there's a big difference between that and no, get away from me. So it's all in how you phrase it.
I was reading an article recently about, it was titled like the best rejection text ever. And it was basically this girl and this guy, and she wrote him a text, or he wrote a text that was like, I would love to see you on a second date. And she wrote back and said, I had a great time with you. I think you are a wonderful person, but I think we lack a certain connection, but I wish you the best of luck. And it was very straightforward, and it didn't drag out. And he felt very thankful that she was so honest and upfront and told the truth like that. So can you kind of talk on that along the lines of, maybe our listeners are dating and they come across a date and the person wants a second one, but they're just not interested. What's the best way? Is it best to just give a very honest response like that? Or is there another technique that may be better?
I think that the honest approach is always the best. I think that if you can be, transparent and honest and empathetic, like that will always win out. And so her text is fantastic. And I think the only nitpicky change I would make to her text is I would change the word but, like you're a wonderful person, but I didn't feel a connection, to an and, because when you say but, it negates whatever you just said beforehand. And so I think with the tweak to and, you're a wonderful person, and I feel like we didn't have a connection, I wish you the best of luck, would be even better. It could really, polish up that already excellent text. But what happens if we ghost people or we draw things out or are not honest? We're sending a number of messages. And so actually we send the message, we send one particular message, is that we think that they can't handle it. We think that they're not strong enough or can't deal with our rejection, that they're fragile. And it really does them a disservice to not be honest. So that's one thing. And the second thing is when we do ghost somebody or like draw things out and leave all this uncertainty hanging in the air, people will fill in that uncertainty with worst case scenarios. And so the awkwardness that we save ourselves by not writing a difficult yet honest text or email or whatever, or face-to-face conversation or whatever it is we're doing, the pain we save ourselves gets transferred to the other person. It gets dumped on them. And they will fill in the uncertainty with, oh my gosh, she must hate me. Or, oh, it must have been that thing I said. I feel so horrible about that. Or I wonder what it was. There must be something I'm doing that I'm not even aware of. Oh my gosh, what could it be? I must have a blind spot. And that tortures us. And so it's much better to write a text or to communicate honestly, like the example you gave, because it is certain. It doesn't leave that room for uncertainty for us to fill in the gaps with all our worst case scenarios and our own, kind of personal fears. So again, honest and empathetic, absolutely the way to go.
Well, that's great. And it's funny that you mentioned the whole switching the and to but, because the interview we had before this interview was, we had talked about that too. So it's very enlightening and something that we're going to try to implement into our relationship in general, because it can turn a negative conversation into so much more positive.
It can make it so much more validating. That's absolutely right.
Well, Ellen, we appreciate all of this amazing information you've given us and our listeners. So why don't we finish by having you tell our listeners where they can find you online, and then we'll say goodbye.
Absolutely. So I have a podcast myself, comes out every Friday. It's called Savvy Psychologist. And we use evidence-based research to solve listeners' problems. So it's they can find it wherever they like to get their podcasts. And I also have a book called How to Be Yourself, Quiet Your Inner Critic and Rise Above Social Anxiety. And certainly social anxiety and rejection have a lot of overlap. So there are many, many tips in there to try to overcome and rise above social anxiety. And I hope your listeners check it out and find it helpful.
Absolutely. And we'll have the links to your website, your book, and your podcast on your show notes page on our website at idopodcast.com. And our listeners know to go there to check it out. And thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much. It was an honor and a pleasure.
Hi guys, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. As always, all the links are in the show notes page as well as on the podcast description. And while you're on our website, we encourage you guys to check out our 14-day Happy Couple Challenge. We send you an email for 14 days with simple, doable challenges to help strengthen and improve your relationship. And on our website, we also have a bunch of free resources for your relationship. So we encourage you to check those out. We also have our Love Tribe on Facebook. We encourage you guys to join the tribe and be there for support for each other. If you have questions or just need some relationship advice, We are all here for each other. The group has grown to almost 1,000 people, and we love it. So we hope you guys join that. You can go to Facebook, Love Tribe Fam, and you'll find us right there. And if you are interested in learning more about our flagship course, Spark My Relationship, we hope you guys check it out. We have a special offer that is only for podcast listeners. So you can go to sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock, and you can unlock that special offer and learn more. As always, thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next week.